After some tense discussions, NATO and Russia have agreed to try to schedule more meetings about Ukraine's future. Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says both parties expressed the need to dialogue and explore a schedule of future meetings, despite tensions over Moscow's military buildup near Ukraine. He says there are still significant differences between NATO allies and Russia on the issue, and he stressed that Ukraine has the right to decide its future security arrangements on its own. He also said that NATO would continue to leave the door open to new members. Well, with us now to unpack this situation is Bradley Bowman, the Senior Director of the Center on Military and Political Power at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Mr. Bowman, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Now, I know the issue of rising tensions between Russia and NATO is really not new, but can you outline this latest dispute to our viewers?
Absolutely. So what has essentially happened in the last few weeks or months has been that Russia has assembled approximately 100,000 combat forces on the borders of Ukraine. I mean, to Ukraine's north, to Ukraine's east, and also in the south in Crimea, which some of your viewers may recall is actually part of Ukraine that Russia illegally invaded and annexed in 2014. And we're not just, these are not just logistical personnel. These are combat troops. I'm talking about main battle tanks. I'm talking about infantry fighting vehicles, multiple launch rocket systems, everything that Vladimir Putin would need to conduct a major new invasion of Ukraine. What's his goal? His goal is, in my view, to bully Kyiv, to bully Ukraine. For what purpose? He wants them not to become a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
All right, sir. Well, we know both sides, Russia and NATO, have agreed to further talks. What are the main points in the negotiations so far?
The main points are that, Vladimir Putin's objectives and the objectives of NATO, frankly, are at loggerheads. They're really in direct contradiction. And if we zoom out for a moment, really what's at stake here? In my view, what's at stake is two worldviews. A worldview of Vladimir Putin might makes right, that I'm powerful, I'm more powerful than you, and therefore I can tell you what to do, Ukraine. I can tell you what to do, Georgia. It's that worldview, which kind of sounds a little bit like the 19th century, doesn't it? And a worldview of territorial integrity, national sovereignty, and the rule of law. I mean, the question for your viewers is, should the people of Ukraine have the right to determine with whom they associate? That's the question. If you say no, and if you say that, then you're with Vladimir Putin, I would say. If you say yes, then you're with NATO. And so that's the core conflict. And so what has Vladimir Putin done? He's very shrewdly assembled this combat power around Ukraine, as I've said, to do what the late and former U.S. Secretary of State George Shultz said, to cast a shadow of power over the negotiating table. At a minimum, he gets his concessions at the negotiating table, or he conducts the invasion. And he's been deliberately vague on that. His staffers are saying, oh, no, we're not interested. But then Vladimir Putin says, well, if we don't get what we want, we're going to have to pursue a, quote, military technical solution. We all know what that means.
Now, this is a very interesting tension point, sir. Considering NATO is a defensive alliance, why is Russia thinking the expansion of NATO would be a threat to it?
It's a good question. I would ask the same question. I would go further. I would state the following fact, is that NATO is not an offensive threat to Vladimir Putin. And I think he knows it. I understand the historical Russian sensibilities. I understand, we can talk about Napoleon's invasion. We can talk about World War II. I get it. But there is no desire on the part of the United States, our NATO allies, or Ukraine to threaten Russia. But here's the irony. Vladimir Putin's own actions are demonstrating the need for NATO, right? He has not done what he's done against the Baltic member states, which are members of NATO, because he knows that would have invoked the NATO treaty, the Article 5 commitment, that attack against one is attack against all. Instead, he went after Ukraine, which is not a NATO member. So he himself is making the case for everyone to see in Eastern Europe that, wow, NATO membership is value, and that makes Kyiv, that makes Ukraine want that membership all the more. So the problem is not Ukraine, in my view. The problem is the aggressive behavior of Vladimir Putin. And that's not an intellectual thing or a guess. That is history. That's 2014 Crimea invasion. He's his own worst enemy.
All right, Mr. Bowman, just about 30 seconds left here. But what do you expect from the next round of talks?
I think Vladimir Putin is going to see if he can accomplish his objectives at the negotiating table. So far, I'm glad to see that we're not giving in to these his demands, which I think would be betrayal of the core tenets of our democratic principles and the NATO alliance. And so it's ultimately come down to Vladimir Putin, and he may not know what he's going to do. But I think we have to help Ukraine have the capability to defend their country. And the more powerful Ukraine is, the less likely Putin is to come in and try to accomplish his political objectives with military force.
All right, sir. We'll definitely have to keep an eye on this developing situation. Mr. Bowman, thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you so much.